Okay, well, welcome back. It's Nicola Cairncross here, and today I'm going to tell you how to write any story, how to write an email, how to write a testimonial, how to write your own origin story in case you have to record a video or stand on stage one day. And it's an absolutely foolproof way of writing any story in your business. It's called The Hero's Journey, and you may have heard of it. It's a lot of action movies are based on the hero's journey. In fact, it's the most popular type of story ever in the history of humanity, because we all imagine ourselves as the hero. The Hobbit is one, Star Wars is another one. And as we go through the 12 elements of the hero's journey story, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. It's going to be really quick though. I'm just going to use it as an example so that you could see how you could write your own hero's journey story, or use the stories that your customers give you as testimonials to write compelling case studies. So the first element is the ordinary world, and that's where it starts. And my ordinary world moment came when I was standing in my dining room. My little girl Phoebe was asleep upstairs. I was expecting Nelson. We'd just got married. My husband had just called to say that he was being made redundant. And I stood in that living room in Kensal Rise, and the sunlight was streaming through the windows, and I just wanted to cry because I didn't know how we were going to cope financially. And that was my ordinary world moment. I had this epiphany in that dining room that if it was to be, it was up to me. Why did this always happen, I thought first. Why does this always happen to me? And I was using the wrong language there. I was using personal, permanent and pessimistic language. And that's the three things you mustn't do. You need to turn that around if you hear yourself doing it. Why does this always happen to me? So it's personal, it's pessimistic, and it's permanent. The word always makes it permanent. So I was standing in the ordinary world and I was about to step over into my new world, because I was asking myself these questions. Why, if there's a woman out there who's the same height as me, the same weight as me, the same hair colour as me, why is she successful and I'm not? And it was all down to taking personal responsibility. So that's when I stepped over from the ordinary world into the extraordinary world of the hero's journey. Then comes the call to adventure. There's always a call to adventure. And with mine, it was to get a job working for Benny Gray in the space organisation. I think I've told this story in one of my other videos, but basically I was going for absolutely rubbish secretarial jobs. And then just as I realised that I needed to up my game and really reach out and reach for the stars a bit more, and that I was worth more than just working as a secretary in an aggregates company in Acton, and the very next week, an advert appeared in the Media Guardian for this incredible arts entrepreneur, and I went to work for him. I've told the story about how I pursued him by going around to all his buildings and writing reports on them all. And he was compelled to give me a job, even though he didn't actually have a job to give me, because he said, we don't let people like you slip through our fingers that easily. And it wasn't anything special about me, it was just the fact that I'd got off my arse and gone and made some real effort to impress him. So that was my call to adventure. And then the next thing is the refusal of the call. I didn't actually refuse the call at the time. I actually went on to work for Benny for a couple of years, but there was a domestic shift. We moved down to Worthing and I was travelling every day on the train up and down from Worthing to London. It was a bit of a grind. And I went back to mediocrity. I was offered a job locally and I went back to mediocrity, but that didn't last long. I was actually made redundant from that job. So, and that's often what happens when you refuse the call. You're tested. And often the test is not a very pleasant one. So that was what happened to me. I was offered mediocrity. I took it for the sake of ease of life. I was made redundant, and I realised that I knew that I had to seize the adventure. Next stage is meeting the mentor. So something or someone will appear in your life when you've fully embraced the call to adventure and you've committed yourself. Someone or something will appear that will help you along your way. It might be a person with some special knowledge that you need. It might be a talisman of some kind, but often in action adventure movies, it's a talisman of some kind. But in my case, it was meeting my first mentor. I'd never had a mentor before in my life. Her name was Jill Fielding, and she was one of the Channel 4's secret millionaires on the first series. You might have seen her. She was blonde and she lived undercover, and I think she was the only one who actually managed to live on the money. She was an incredible person. She taught me a lot about how money really works. Whatever the mentor or the talisman gives you, it gives you the strength to carry on with it. It makes you feel strong and brave and that you've got something. Of course, you know nothing. You've got nothing, but it makes you feel like you have. So after a couple of years with Jill, I struck out on my own. we went into partnership together, and she actually ended up buying me out of my share of the business, which is the first time that had ever happened to me. So that opened my eyes to a possibility there. I'd crossed the threshold at that point, and that's when you do something. You sometimes get a test, but sometimes you just cross the threshold and you know that you're never going back to the life you had. That's a crucial point in the journey. Next comes tests, allies, and enemies. So in the next stage of the story, your enemies are revealed, whether that's real people or whether that's real situations or whether that's your own internal workings trying to go against you. But you'll find that you have allies now. I've actually got loads of friends and allies now. I didn't have any at the time, but I remember now that just shortly after Jill and I parted company, I ended up buying a hotel, no money down, the Acacia. I don't know if you've heard me mention it. And I was on my own there. I was just, the only allies I had at that point were books, but I was devouring those. That's not true, actually. I had a bank manager and an accountant who were very supportive. But I didn't know anything about running a hotel, and although I got it really right for about 3 years, it started to go wrong after that. But just as things were starting to go wrong with the hotel, a new set of mentors arrived in the form of Andy, Greg and Pete. They've been my friends and mentors ever since. So you form your own little gang. It's a bit like having a band of brothers. And I often joke, actually, that they all feel like my brothers. And together, you advance with the talisman, the knowledge, the secrets that you've gained along the way, and your band of brothers, and you come towards the secret cave. This is going to be the first of many tests as an entrepreneur, but it's the biggest and the scariest one to date. And with me, it was the fact that I decided I didn't want to run the hotel anymore. I wanted to go more into internet marketing. And I decided that I was going to apply for planning permission to change the use of the hotel, and I was going to make a huge profit by selling off both halves of the hotel as private houses. But I had to close the hotel in order to apply for the planning permission. And right at the 11th hour, even though I'd been assured by everybody concerned that the planning permission was going to sail through, it was refused. So now I had a non-functioning hotel. But my mentors held my hand through that. That was the ordeal. You have to go through some sort of test or ordeal. It's also called sometimes a crisis in storytelling circles. So some sort of last minute crisis catches you unawares, and it's only with the knowledge that you've acquired and the mentors, your band of brothers you have beside you, that you get through it. And they certainly were invaluable in those days, that's for sure. You need to go through some sort of crisis point that transforms you. And on the other side of that crisis point, you actually come out a better person. And so you're rewarded by getting the sword or the even more powerful talisman that enables you to defeat your foes and return triumphant to your village or your town. So what happened with me was finally managed to get out of the hotel. And with the knowledge that I'd gained there, I was able to start a brand new business called Automatic Marketing Machine, I think it was. And it worked really, really well for several years. Little did I know, though, that was just a fake crisis. I was about to approach an even bigger, scarier cave, which of course was the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, 2010, where I lost absolutely everything, including my house, my car. My kids had to go and live with their dad. The only thing that kept me going was the company of my mentors and stalwarts beside me. In fact, we all went through the mill at that time. That was absolutely horrendous. And that was an ordeal. That was the big ordeal. But the thing I came through that crisis with was the knowledge that I was never going to give up. The knowledge that nobody could take away what was inside my head. And that was the jewel, the crown, the talisman, the sword I came out of that big crisis with. The knowledge that I could never give up. The knowledge that as long as I got breath in my body, I'm going to carry on trying to be a better entrepreneur. And of course, I did rise again. It took longer than it should have done, though. It really did. I had to go home and lick my wounds for a while. And then after a while, I got to stage 11 of the hero's journey, which is resurrection, which is when I worked for Neil Asher for a while and I've got my confidence back and I learned a load of new skills. And then I launched Clicks and Leads, and it's been a real success ever since. And what's better is it's been flexible. I've been able to mould it and change it according to my life circumstances. So that's another thing. That almost is, for me, the real elixir. And that's the final part of the hero's journey, that you return with the elixir. And whether that elixir is knowledge or success or money or flexibility, for me, my elixir's always been freedom. I've always dreamed of having a diary with no appointments in it. And actually, at the moment, my diary's just got one appointment on a Thursday afternoon every single week. And that's something I do with one of my mentors and friends from those days. because I want to give back to him for the support he gave me during the ordeal we all went through. So that's the hero's journey. I hope you can see how if somebody gives you a bit of a testimonial, you might be able to ask them the questions and say, what was your life like before? What happened? How did you put your hand up? How did you step forward? How did you commit yourself? Then what happened after that? Did you go through some sort of success and then another crisis came along and then you found out something, or you got a mentor? And you've really got to sort of get this information out of your clients when they're giving you testimonials, because they make for much more powerful testimonials. We all love that hero's journey story arc and the 12 parts of the hero's journey that I've outlined for you today. So I hope that makes a bit of sense, and I hope that helps you tell your story. When I used to tell this story before I'd had the global financial crisis, and I was riding high with the money, gym and the hotel, and I thought I'd made it. So I was able to fit the hero's journey into that point. And then when the global financial crisis came along, I realised I was just at the end of Act 2 and just about to start Act 3. But it's a really neat storytelling device. It can also help you when you're writing emails, just simple emails. I mean, in the early days when I was writing my email follow-up sequences to let people know who I am, what I can do and what I can do for them, that's the automated follow-up sequences that come after people opt in for a free gift at your website. And that's a very useful structure to write one of those emails. And finally, I'd just like to give you a little bit of a resource. I'm not sure if he's still around, but I learned an awful lot of this from a chap called Andre Chaperon. And he had a course called Autoresponder Madness, and I highly recommend you go and check that out. He might well have written a book by now, but he's got a wonderful little website, and I absolutely love the drawings on his website. But he's very, very into storytelling, and he'll tell you about things like cliffhangers that I haven't had time to cover today. So go and check him out, Andre Chaperon, Autoresponder Madness. In the meantime, I'd love for you to tell me in the comments below, was this any use? Did I ramble? Are you interested in hearing more about my story? Well, I hope you've enjoyed it anyway. I'll see you tomorrow.